Hey there, fiber junkies! Welcome back to the Color Cauldron. I'm Johanna, the owner and dyer behind Potion Yarns and the host of this podcast. If this is your first time joining me, thank you for stopping by and checking it out. And if you are a returning viewer, thank you so much for coming back and giving me another shot. This is a pretty new podcast still. This is only episode 9. I just started it right before the start of 2018, before the new year. So I always tell my viewers this is a learning experience. I'm still growing and learning and getting better, and will continue to get better as I go. But I'm having a lot of fun with it, and I'm glad that you decided to stop by today. So a couple weeks ago on the podcast, we talked about facing failure. And I kind of wanted to start introducing themes every so often that come up through crafting, give examples of our crafting life, some of the lessons and themes and things that we can learn that translate into our other life, our day-to-day life. So we talked about facing failure and how to turn that to our advantage, both in knitting and in life. And today we're going to be talking about something that's actually pretty similar, but kind of a slightly different aspect, and that is making mistakes. So I wanted to start by talking to you guys about a new project that I am thinking about casting on. Well, I'm going to cast on. I just haven't done it yet. But I wanted to show you a project that I'm about to start, and then we'll jump into talking about what I've been up to for the last couple weeks. Pardon my melting makeup and my hair in a ponytail. I'm not feeling like I look my absolute best today, but I tried to film this podcast earlier today and had some technical difficulties, so I needed to reshoot it. And I just got home from my swing dance practice a little while ago, so I'm not looking absolutely fresh because it's the end of the night. And if you don't know already, I lead a swing dance performance team here in Kansas City called the KC Swingsters. And it's a really fun time. It's a really great, awesome group. They feel more like my family than, extended family members do to me, because I see them so often, and I've really grown close to them over the years. It's really fun, but yeah, I've been dancing and getting all sweaty, so now we're going to do the podcast. So the project that I'm about to cast on is actually a colorwork sweater. I really love stranded knitting, and I'm really into doing different types of colorwork, and I am wanting to do more steeking. So I decided I was going to cast on a project, and actually the pattern that I'm looking at does not have steeking. It's just worked back and forth, and I think that I'm going to incorporate a steek anyways. I think I might knit it as one piece and cut up the front to make a steek, because I really enjoy steeking. I did my first steek ever back in November, and I did a Facebook Live video on my Facebook group so that people could join me and watch me cut my knitting for the first time. And it was really fun and went really well. So the pattern that I'm looking at is, I think it's called Sherlock Lives, and it's a free pattern on Ravelry, which I will pop the link in the description box below so that you can go check it out. And it's basically just two colors, a main color and a contrast color, and it's plain body and then a colorwork yoke. And the pattern of the yoke looks like the wallpaper that is in the TV show Sherlock. It's a kind of a modern retelling of the Sherlock Holmes story set in modern England, and really, really well done. And the wallpaper in Sherlock's apartment has this really awesome, big, bold, graphic, cool looking pattern. And so she took the motif from the wallpaper and put it into a yoke on the sweater. It's really, really pretty. So I chose my colors, and I am going to be knitting it out of a new to me yarn. It's a yarn that I got for the shop, but I just got a few skeins to kind of test it out and see how I liked dyeing it and see what I thought of it. So I'm going to knit these up to kind of test them out and see if it's something that I want to bring to the shop. But they're like huge mega hanks of yarn. So you get 250 grams, which is about 2.5 times the size of the normal skeins I sell in my shop. And it's 100% non-superwash wool, so it's not washable. But it's just a really nice, it's a non-superwash merino actually. So it feels really nice and fairly soft, but it does have a bit more stickiness to it than a superwash wool, and it would be a feltable wool as well. And so these huge mega hanks have over 700 yards. I think it's like 727 or 730, something like that. So they have a ton of yardage in them. And so I was caking up yarn that I dyed a couple weeks ago. I actually still haven't cast it on from like a week or two ago, but I was caking up yarn using my new ball winder, which is one of the Stanwood extra large sizes, and I totally love it so much. And I was just blown away by how big this cake is. Look at how big this thing is. I mean, It's like the size of my face. It's so big. I could wear it like a hat. But it's so much fun, and I just loved that my new ball winder could easily handle this much yarn and still had room for more, so that was pretty exciting. But I am using the Lady Absinthe colorway as my main color. You can find this in my shop. It's currently available on the Foxy sock, and I'm probably going to dye up some more worsted as well. It's a really beautiful blend of like chartreuse, acid green, kind of a bit of a old mossy green look as well, but pretty bright and pretty light chartreusey. I just really love it, and I am knitting that as the main color. And then this Samhain skein is, I'm going to test it out on a swatch and see if the Samhain looks good as the contrast color. It's a gray and black tonal, kind of charcoal and black tonal. So it is deep and dark, but it's not as dark a black as like a pure black solid yarn would be. It has a little bit of shifting between lighter and darker shades. So I want to make sure that it doesn't shift too much and that it has enough contrast with the Lady Absinthe to look good. I mean, they look great right now, but on the colorwork pattern with the intricate details, I want to make sure that you can see the contrast well enough that it's worth it. So I'm going to try swatching for that. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks I will get a swatch done and then proceed to see how that works out. But I just wanted to share those really huge mega hanks with you because I thought they were hilarious and fun. And it is a sport weight yarn, so I currently don't carry sport weight in the shop, but I've really been wanting to expand to it, and I'm trying to decide when will be the right time. And after looking at my budget, I don't think it's going to happen this spring, which was my original goal, so I'm probably going to put it off a little bit longer. But I'm thinking about having a few of these mega hanks that I have left over in the shop. I haven't decided if that's going to happen or not yet, but it might. And if they are, they will be a little bit pricey, but the cost per yard is going to be significantly cheaper because you get them in a larger put up, but you will get a mega hank. And like for the sweater I'm doing, one skein is just about enough for the small size sweater that I'm going to be knitting. I think it's going to be enough. I have to check that, but I'm pretty sure that one skein will be enough. And then the contrast color is going to use hardly any of this skein probably, so I'll still be able to get a project out of that too. So they go pretty far, and if you're doing like a sweater, you'd only need a couple of those to make a whole sweater, so pretty exciting. Okay, so let's talk about the main theme, what I wanted to tell you guys about. Starting off with just what I've been doing. So the last 2 weeks or so, week and a half to 2 weeks, I took on a big project that I'd been meaning to do for a while, which was organizing my stash and my works in progress and unfinished objects. What a project. Holy crap. It was pretty big. I try to do it every year to 2 years or so, go through and kind of at least slightly reorganize and kind of make sure that I'm keeping up to date on projects and things. But we all have those projects that just don't go very well, or even the ones that are going well, but we just get distracted or get on a deadline for something else and put it down and end up shoving it unfinished into the back of the closet or the bottom of the drawer or whatever, and then finding it months or even years later and needing to finish it. Well, I started with those. I went through the works in progress first, and that was rough, and then I organized my stash yarn and got rid of a bunch of stuff. And when I was working through the unfinished objects, I came across several that just needed some finishing touches. I came across several that were in various stages of being knit, and many of them I'm going to attempt to finish. There were several, though, that I decided, after looking at them, I just felt like I wasn't happy with the project. Either I'd lost my mojo for it and was just kind of over it, or several of them I realized the yarn and the pattern were not a good pairing, and the more I was knitting on it, the more I realized I really hate this yarn with this pattern. Sometimes it was just, I hate this yarn, period, so I ripped it out, caked it up, and put it in the bag to go to the thrift store. But some of it was genuinely like, the yarn is pretty and all, but it just looks terrible in this pattern. I really don't like how it's coming out. So I ended up ripping out a bunch of projects that were half or even over half knit. And like I said, some of them I caked up the yarn to reuse in other projects. Several of them, though, I just ended up donating to the thrift store or giving away to somebody to finish, including this lace shawl that used 2 skeins of Malabrigo lace, and it was 3/4 of the way done. I was like on the last section of lace at the bottom, and I just shoved it away to work on something else, and that was probably 7 or 8 months ago, and I got it out last week and looked at it, and I just hated it. Like, not even just, I don't don't really like this anymore, or I just don't really have the energy to finish it. It was like, I literally get angry looking at you. I hate you so much, which doesn't happen to me very often with yarn, but it definitely happened with this. And I don't know why I bought the yarn colors. They just weren't my colors. It looked like something a Barbie doll would wear, but like not in a good way, like super pink and super purple. And I was like, what was I thinking? I wouldn't wear these colors. Like, I wear pink and I wear purple, and I even wear them together, but these were like just particular shades of pink and purple that were just nauseating and not me, and I wouldn't wear it. And as I was knitting them up, I didn't like how the colors were distributing, and I was just thinking, I'm never gonna wear this, and I don't have anyone I can give it to that would like those colors. So I just ended up pulling the needle out and shoving. I didn't even unwind it all. I just shoved it in a bag and took it to the thrift store because I couldn't face it. And I realized a very valuable thing, which is my knitting is here as relaxation. It's a source of joy for me. It's a way for me to create, to feel satisfied, to feel happy, to feel relaxed, and to de-stress. And so if my knitting is causing me stress, if I don't like it anymore, there is no reason for me to finish it. In fact, if anything, I really shouldn't finish it because I'm just not going to enjoy it. And that's the point of it. I don't do knitting for a living. I dye yarns, and so I do tend to knit shop samples or do test knits and things from time to time that helps my business. But for the most part, I don't knit for a living. I don't have to do the test knits. I don't have to do these other things. I literally do it as enjoyment, as a hobby. So I want to make sure that it stays enjoyment, and I'm not forcing myself to do something that is going to steal the joy from me. It's not worth it to me. And even if I spend a lot of money on the yarn, if I stash it for a while or start working with it and then realize that I hate the yarn colors or the texture, I'm going to get rid of it. And that was the other thing with the shawl. It was a single ply. Malabrigo lace is a not very tight single ply. It's a very fluffy single ply. And in my experience, I've worked with it before, and it pills terribly. And it just is very, very fragile and doesn't last long, and in my opinion is not a very good quality yarn. I love Malabrigo yarns, and I love all their other yarns that I've ever used. Their Rios worsted weight is one of my favorites. Their sock yarn is great. Their Machita single ply, which is a fingering single ply, is also awesome for the right projects like shawls and stuff. But the Malabrigo lace, for some reason, I just cannot stand. So I ended up getting rid of that, and it felt really good. So I ripped out quite a few unfinished objects and works in progress that I just had lost the joy for, or just lost my place in the pattern, couldn't find it, and was like, you know what, I'm just going to restart. Then, I don't know what happened to me this last week, but I like hit this streak in my knitting where I'm working on several works in progress right now. Like we've talked about, I'm not monogamous. And I had so many problems. At least 3 or 4 of the projects I'm working on over this last week, I had to rip out and re-knit at least several sections, like big fat sections, if not rip back to the very beginning and cast on again. It was crazy. I kept making mistakes, some of them dumb, some of them understandable, but I kept making all these mistakes or knitting up a ways and then being like, I don't like the order of the yarn colors, I'm gonna rearrange the colors, so I need to rip this out, or I don't like how this is turning out, or I wanted to add buttons, or I forgot the buttons, now I gotta go back and make buttonholes, or whatever it was. And so I ended up ripping a ton over the last week. Like a lot more than I normally do in such a short period of time. I tend to put off ripping until I absolutely have to, and so, you know, if I'm ripping out, it's pretty bad. But I've learned over the years that if I don't like it, and if it's going to cause me to not use the item, or if it's going to be super noticeable and irritating to me, it's always worth whatever amount of pain to rip it out and do it right, because it's just not worth putting all that work into something that you don't like. So anyways, I've been ripping a ton of stuff, which has been kind of humbling. And so on that lines, I wanted to share with you one particular project and kind of give you an example of how my knitting overlapped into my life and taught me a really humiliating, embarrassing, frustrating, but important lesson this week. So I started a new shawl pattern a week or so ago. And it's a brioche shawl, and the pattern can be done with just 2 colors. But the designer knit her sample in 4 colors and said you can use as many as you want. You can fade in 20 colors, 30 colors, whatever you want. Use up scrap yarns, whatever. So I had 4 single skeins in my stash that just looked beautiful together, and I really wanted to make them into this shawl. So I selected my yarns and set out to knit this pattern. I was so excited. And I got frustrated because I couldn't find the instructions for knitting the 4 colors like the pattern designer had done in the sample. I could just find the 2. But I figured, oh well, I'm smart, I can just do a fade or something, right? So I'll just go ahead and start in on it. So I did, and then I had a few other frustrations in the cast on. I ended up ripping out the cast on and recasting on 4 or 5 times, but it was just the cast on in the first couple rows, so it wasn't a big deal. And then I kept going, and after a significant portion of the shawl, like probably a 1/5 of the shawl was done, and I made some mistakes that I tried to cover up and then kept going, and it just got worse. And then I lost my place in the pattern and ended up skipping a row of the instructions and starting to knit, and then realizing it was wrong, ripping out. Even when I got back to where I was supposed to be and knit the row I was supposed to do, my stitch count was wrong and I had too many mistakes to go back and fix it. So I got very frustrated. I spent hours on Ravelry looking for pattern errata, looking for suggestions, looking for in the comments, looking in the knit along thread that she had for this shawl, looking everywhere, trying to find someone that was having the same issues I was and some suggestions. And I found a lot of people having other issues, but not the issue I was having. So I got very frustrated. And it just happened to be on a day where I was having a terrible day. Everything was going wrong. I was exhausted, cranky. Everything seemed to be going poorly, and all I wanted to do was knit. And my husband and I were having a bit of, not like an actual fight, but like just weren't exactly the best of friends in the moment. So we kind of were like, let's just take some time alone, separate, cool off a little bit, we'll talk later. And I went into our bedroom and took my knitting and was like, you know what I need to do? I just need to like curl up in bed with some blankets and knit on something and relax. And so this is when I ran into the problem with this and ended up spending hours, instead of knitting, spending hours on Ravelry looking for answers. I got so frustrated, and I did a very dumb thing. I went on the pattern page, and in the comments section on Ravelry, I put in a comment noting my frustration over the poorly written pattern, the fact that the designer did not give instructions for matching your project to her knit sample, and the fact that I was frustrated she didn't include charts, and I was frustrated about stitch counts being off and couldn't find any errata and blah blah blah. Basically just airing my frustrations. While I wasn't like knock down, drag out insulting, I was definitely airing my frustration and giving it a bit of a harsh tone. The next morning, I awoke to a message from the designer telling me that she was hurt and frustrated by how I had just mentioned this in a public forum without ever coming to her and asking her for help or, you know, explaining my problems in a kinder way and asking for suggestions. And she felt pretty frustrated about it. I went back and reread my comment and felt intense shame. Looking back on it, I realized I was taking out my frustration on both my own knitting problems and the rest of my life and the things I was going through at the moment and my exhaustion. And I was taking it out on her and the fact that I couldn't find answers. And she was right. I didn't go through the proper channels. I should have contacted her first, or at the very least moderated my tone so I wasn't being so cranky. And I just really wasn't super nice about it. And I never do that kind of a thing. So I was really embarrassed, and I decided that I would delete the comment to start, and then I was thinking about what I could do to fix this, and I thought, well, you know, in my knitting, when I have a big old kerfuffle and everything's getting wrong, I rip out, and if it's really bad, I just go back to the beginning and rip the entire thing out. So I started by deleting the comment. I thought that's the first thing. That's literally like just frogging the whole thing. And then I sent the designer a very apologetic note explaining that I realized I'd taken out my frustration, that I felt really, really bad. The worst part was she had answered both of my issues in her message and explained that she did indeed put instructions for the 4 colors and told me exactly what page of the pattern to find them on. Then also recommended that I reread the notes and suggested a couple fixes for the issues I was having. Upon reading her message and then going back and looking at my pattern and rereading the entire intro and notes at the beginning of the pattern, I realized she did indeed put instructions for how to knit the 4 colors on page 1, and I missed it. I don't know how. I think I even looked at it and thought it was referring to something else or something. I don't know, you guys, but I clearly missed that part. And then I had read through the notes, but I'd misunderstood one of the instructions, and so that I got my stitch count off. And It was humiliating, but she was right, and there was nothing wrong with the pattern. It was all user error. So then I had to send her this apology note, and I just basically said, I'm really sorry. I was a jerk. And I explained that I had ripped out the entire shawl back to the beginning and was just going to recast on and start fresh because I felt like I needed a fresh start, and that I really hoped we could have a fresh start too, and that I deleted my comment and I would be sure to give her good reviews and everything. So, and she responded with an incredibly sweet, warm, gracious note thanking me for the apology and you know, offering further help and offering me to join her Ravelry group so that I could get more help if I had any issues and all this stuff. And she was very kind and very gracious and gave me the fresh start I was really looking for. So that was awesome. And I did rip out the entire shawl, and it turned out to be a blessing because after I did, using now the guide of the 4 colors that she's using so that mine will match her sample a little better, I realized that I actually didn't like the order of the colors that I'd used, so I rearranged the order and used a different color for number 1 and number 2, etc. So I think I'm going to like it a lot better this time around, and it's very, very baby because I just barely, like a couple days ago, recast it on, and then I haven't worked on it since then, so it's only about this big right now. But it's starting well, and so far I'm having no other issues, and it's all making a lot more sense, and I'm excited about restarting it. But I was just reflecting with that whole situation. I used to not be very good at apologizing when I made a mistake. I had some issues with pride, and also just with, I think, just not wanting to admit, I'm a perfectionist. I've mentioned that on the podcast before. I'm really hard on myself, much harder on myself than on anyone else. Although I'm pretty hard on other people too, unfortunately. I'm learning how to be better about that. But even when I give other people grace and give them a break and don't expect ridiculous amounts from them, I tend to expect 5 times more from myself, and I don't know why I do that. But I have because of that perfectionism, I have a really hard time, or I typically have had a hard time in the past with admitting my mistakes and asking for forgiveness. And when I do ask for forgiveness, I do it as short and quick and quickly move on because I'm embarrassed, you know? It's hard. It's hard to ask for forgiveness and admit you were wrong, and you know, it can be really humiliating, and it's always scary when you don't know how the other person's going to respond, like a stranger that you don't know on the internet that you just insulted on Ravelry. So it was really healing for me. I actually spent some reflection time before I sent her the note, and then when I sent the note, I just tried to really put my heart and soul into it and like type it out so that it was a good apology, and I feel like it was really well done, and thankfully it was really well received. She was incredibly gracious and sweet, and I got an amazing response. And funny how when you come at someone in frustration and anger, they respond in frustration and anger, and then when you come at them in humility and apologetically and just say, you know what, I'm sorry, I'd like to start over and be friends, they're like, yeah, me too. But amazingly enough, what you put out is what you get back, right? So I just wanted to reflect a little bit on how I am so grateful for situations where I can rip it and reknit. You know, in knitting and crochet, it's so easy to just pull out your mistakes and knit back. Now, it's not always easy. We all have had those times where it's really frustrating, or intricate lace shawls that are very complicated or whatever. It's hard to pick up stitches after you've ripped a lot and reknit. But comparatively, it's pretty easy. And it reminded me, all of the reknitting I did, I thought it was really funny that I'd done all of this ripping out and reknitting on multiple projects right before having this encounter with the designer, and then the shawl that I had to rip out from her was also something that I had to put in there, or that I had to reknit. So I thought it was interesting. It was like the universe was giving me a chance to practice and reflect on how much better it was when I ripped out and reknit, because I'd had 2 projects right before that I'd literally ripped back down to nothing, like pulled every single thing out, recaked the yarn and recast on and started over, and making changes to either my pattern or my stitch count or the yarn or something, and just starting fresh made such a difference. And I went from some trepidation / kind of hating my yarn and my project to loving my projects and being like, I am so glad that I ripped this out. It is so much better. I'm actually going to use it now. I'm actually going to love it. And so that was just really good training for me, because then when this situation happened, I realized I mean, as someone on the internet who I'm never going to see, she lives in another country, she's not somebody that's in any of my circles. It's quite possible, even though I'm in the industry now, it's possible we'll run into each other at some point, but it's also quite possible I'll never actually have to see her or speak to her again. I could avoid interactions on Ravelry and Instagram and everything with her if I really wanted to. But, you know, it seems like a lot of people on the internet don't take responsibility and apologize when they've been wrong. They don't take responsibility for moderating their tone or being kind or gentle over the internet, because it feels like there's a disconnect when you're behind a screen and you don't have to be as gracious as you would in person. And I really didn't want to do that. I really hate that when other people do it, and I really wanted to be better. And I realized that even if she didn't respond well when I apologized, I needed to apologize for me, because I felt bad that I'd been a jerk and I wanted to make it right. I wanted to do everything in my power to reknit, to rip it out and reknit and make it better. And then when I did, she responded great, and it was awesome. So it was really healing for me. I can't tell you how light and how much better and how like happy and calm and zen I felt after I sent the message, even before getting her response. And then after getting a great response, I felt even better. So it was incredible, and I just wanted to share that with you, even though it's hugely humiliating for me to have to admit that I was a brat, and that I was a brat in public on the internet. But I wanted to share it with you guys, because I'm not perfect, and I know you guys know that, but I'm not perfect, and you know what? I know you're not perfect either, and that's okay. We don't have to be perfect. We just have to keep learning to fix our mistakes as far as it's within our power to do. And so I wanted to encourage you to have the guts to apologize, have the guts to be humble, have the guts to be gracious when someone apologizes to you, and give them a fresh start. And don't be afraid to rip out and reknit, because you'll probably like the result better when you do it right. So that's my reflection for today, and that's all we have time for. This is where we're going to cast off. Love you.